president basically says everything we were thinking about doing in terms of sanction relief is not going to happen now. Everything that I had thought we could do to get you back in the world order flow is not going to happen now. I'm personally very glad that the president has sent this message to Khamenei, because Khamenei is an 86-year-old fanatic, and it's pretty hard for him to hear anything. So the message to Khamenei is really a message to everyone below him and everyone below them and everyone who's 40 and younger about which way they want their country to go for the next many, many years. And I really do hope that the people of Iran, either by crowds in the streets, as happened in 2009 and again in 2021, or if they do it by coup or by a group of just bodyguards who've had it with Khamenei, decide to change the regime, because that would be the best thing for the world. While we're waiting to get Matt back, let me play for you Donald Trump at the White House presser earlier today, cut number 9 about tariffs and U-turns.
Mr. President, a leading global economist just did a 180 and says your tariff plan, you may have outsmarted everybody with it. What is your message?
I love this. I love this question. This is the favorite. This is the best question I've ever been asked, because I've been going through abuse for years on this. Because as you know, we're taking in hundreds of billions of dollars, no inflation whatsoever.
But Mr. President, what is your message to critics who think your tariff plan will cause a recession?
I think they should go back to business school. It's so obvious. It's so obvious. I mean, we're taking in billions and billions of dollars from China and a lot of other countries.
He's absolutely right about that. I want to also go back to a promise he made today after the Supreme Court ruled on barring universal injunctions, cut number 5.
Thanks to this decision, we can now promptly file to proceed with numerous policies that have been wrongly enjoined on a nationwide basis. And some of the cases we're talking about would be ending birthright citizenship, which now comes to the fore. That was meant for the babies of slaves. It wasn't meant for people trying to scam the system and come into the country on a vacation. This was, in fact, it was the same date, the exact same date, the end of the Civil War. It was meant for the babies of slaves, and it's so clean and so obvious. But this lets us go there and finally win that case, because hundreds of thousands
I
of
don't
people
think so, Mr. President. I think you're going to lose that case. Matt Continetti is back. Matt, let's switch over to the Supreme Court today. Universal injunctions are dead, but the court did not reach the merits on birthright citizenship. I don't think birthright citizenship is going to be tossed out, but what did you make of the court's decision on universal injunctions?
I thought it was an excellent decision. I thought it was very important, Hugh, that Chief Justice Roberts assigned it to Amy Coney Barrett, who has been under a lot of criticism from conservatives and from MAGA supporters lately. But she came through with an incredible decision, and she basically concluded, and I think correctly, that the Constitution provides limits on every branch of government, legislative, president, and judicial. And so you can't just say we're going to restrain the presidency by exaggerating the power of the judiciary. And so finally the Supreme Court stepped in and put a stop to it.
And long overdue. I want to echo what you said. People who've been bagging on Justice Barrett are not paying much attention. She is very much a procedure-oriented originalist, and although it's very difficult to predict where she'll be on some arcane cases, she is everything you want in a justice. I mean, really, everything you want in a justice if you're confident of the law being on your side. Matt, I want to ask you about the Defense Intelligence Agency leak, and what do you think was on the mind of the two people who talked to CNN with the bogus report? What were they trying to do?
They were trying to undermine President Trump. We've known this since the beginning. There are bureaucrats inside the federal government who oppose Donald Trump, who oppose his agenda, and certainly oppose the use of force against Iran. Let us not forget that we were dealing with Robert Malley, who had his security clearance canceled during the Biden administration, the Obama architect of the nuclear deal. We had other Biden appointees within the Pentagon who were very close to the Iranian position on the nuclear program. Clearly, there are people inside the bureaucracy that were against the strike, and they thought that they were going to exact revenge by leaking this preliminary assessment. And the real scoundrels, it seems to me, are the mainstream media reporters who ran with it and who publicized this report, even though the report itself said it was preliminary, that it was low confidence, and that it was based solely on satellite imagery and signals intelligence, which may well have been the Iranians trying to convince themselves that everything was fine. So it was a debacle for the left, it was a debacle for the press, and I think that the past few days have shown that the damage actually done to the Iranian nuclear program has been devastating.
Pretty much everyone over the age of 30 knows who Baghdad Bob is. And it's as though the signals intelligence operator listened into a Baghdad Bob press conference and then reported with low confidence that our troops had not reached the center of Baghdad. It was really, I don't think they knew, I think they knew that they were giving off a bad scent, but it ended up in regime propaganda, Matt. So the regime is repurposing CNN stuff into regime propaganda. It's horrific.
By the way, Hugh, this is exactly what we see with the Gaza war, where every statement from Hamas, from a genocidal terrorist organization, is repeated by the mainstream media without any scrutiny whatsoever. And that propaganda, as you say, is then feeded back into forces like Hamas and its allies in the Middle East to say that Israel is committing war crimes when nothing of the sort is taking place.
Matt, the president at the press conference today bemoaned the fact that no one's going to notice that the Democratic Republic of the Congo and Rwanda are signing a peace deal that we negotiated today because of the Supreme Court decision. If that holds, it's actually a very big deal. Were you even aware we were trying to do this?
Well, I've been following it for the past couple months. I know that when Secretary Rubio made the preliminary agreement across my radar, I had known that, earlier in the year, the Rwandan forces and the Rwandan-backed rebels in the DRC had made great gains, and so it was reaching an impasse, the situation there. It's an unheralded achievement of the Trump administration. By the way, what's happening in Lebanon is a similarly unheralded achievement. It goes to Trump's quest to be a peacemaker, and there are some very important consequences of this deal if it's inked, as it looks like it will be this afternoon in D.C. One of them is geostrategic minerals, the rare earths, and the important commodities that are now becoming the new oil of the global economy and in our conflict with China. And so to secure those safe resources is very important. And secondly, Hugh, Africa is going to become increasingly important in the next century. Its population is exploding. It's really the one continent where the population is increasing exponentially and not either stagnant or decreasing. It is becoming richer by the year, slowly but surely. Political stability is very important in Africa, not only for the Africans, but also for the rest of the world, because as that population increases, the pressures for immigration are going to increase as well. And so if we want to prevent another migrant crisis in Europe or another crisis on the southern border after President Trump leaves office, I think we have to make sure that America is playing a role in creating a safe and prosperous Africa. And that seems to me to be exactly what's happening with this deal between Rwanda and the Democratic Republic of Congo.
I agree, and you sound like a lecture I heard by Chris Caldwell last week. Africa going to 500 million people in less than 10 years. It's going to be a migrant crisis or it's going to be progress. We'll see. And this is the third episode of the Maybe Eric Adams Isn't So Bad series on the Hugh Hewitt Show. I've listened to the commentary podcast all week, and the weeping and moaning from our friends in New York has reached my ears, Matt. Do you think they're going to get over it, or do you think Eric Adams is going to actually get a chance to be an alternative to Mom Donnie?
Well, I'm the Dr. Pangloss on the commentary pod because I think that Mayor Adams has the slightest of chances to win in November if he's able to convince Andrew Cuomo not to run, and if the Republican voters decide, you know what, we're better off joining forces with Adams and stopping Mamdani than we are with a socialist anti-Semite as the mayor of New York City. But if I'm the optimist, then we're in trouble because I tend not to have the rosiest view of things. I think New York is in dire straits. And it's going to take a lot to prevent this young man. He's 33 years old. He hasn't really ever held a job in his life. He comes out of a kind of trust fund, champagne socialist university milieu. He could cause great damage to America's greatest city, just at the point, by the way, Hugh, where New York has been kind of getting back to its old self, steadily under Mayor Adams, who's not the best leader, but he appointed Jessica Tisch as the NY police commissioner, and she's very good. And public safety is making great strides. That all could be in jeopardy if Mamdani becomes mayor.
Now, I moved to New York for the first time, Matt, in 1980 at the Nadir. I mean, it was really a wreck and a mess, and you could not walk to Times Square at night. And I enjoyed its renaissance, its rebirth under Giuliani and Bloomberg. Sad for it under de Blasio. Thought maybe Eric Adams could turn around, and in fact, Tisch is. But how bad could it get? I mean, does he have any role in the schools? No one's explained this to me yet. But if he has any role in the school, this guy is a whack job. What I just can't communicate enough. He's way outside of anything American politics has seen before. Do you think New Yorkers get it?
Well, the Democratic primary electorate doesn't. I mean, that's for sure. You know what I think was interesting, Hugh, is that when you break down the voting in the primary by income, Andrew Cuomo won the $50,000 per year and under group. That is to say, the working class, which Mamdani and his cohort is always talking about supporting, they see a socialist canard when they're faced with one, and they rejected it. The working class always rejects socialism. And that's the hope for someone like Adams, if he's able to pull the larger New York working class together in a general election. How bad could it get? It could get really bad. I mean, it's not just the public safety, which is, I think, the most important issue. It is the schools. He does not believe in merit. He does not believe in testing. By the way, he's a graduate of Bronx Science, which is one of the more prestigious public schools in New York City. He wants to undo all of that because of his crazy ideology. And then there's the anti-Semitism. And this is where I think it could get really bad. New York is the largest.
We'll check in on it again next week. I think he's the sweet meteor of death for New York City, for Gotham. But hopefully next week, everyone will have dropped out except Eric Adams. Matt Continetti, follow him on X, @Continetti. Thank you as always, and I love the new background. Thank you for that as well. I hope you're ready for a great weekend wherever you are in this wonderful United States of America. This morning, I joined Dana Perino and Bill Malugin on America's Newsroom in order to talk about, well, a number of things. Let's roll that tape, because I was just talking with Matt Continetti about the mayoral race, and we ended up there this morning as well. Let's roll
Fox
that.
News contributor Hugh Hewitt. This must be a fascinating thing for you to watch, because you are obviously a student of history, and you also understand politics, and you probably have this love-hate relationship with the nation's largest city of New York City. Listen to Mamdani. This is what he said about Democrats and whether they are out of touch.
I think that it is important for all of us to listen more and lecture less. I have heard time and again that the very Democrats who voted for Donald Trump in this city are ones who would come back if we had a relentless focus on an economic agenda. And that's what we delivered over 8 months. And now those are the same Democrats that are coming back as we won districts that Donald Trump won.
I'm not sure that's the case, and maybe it'll turn out to be true. How do you size up this race so far?
Well, I think people in Miami are really cheering on Mr. Mamdani because they want the banking industry and the financial industry that will flee New York to come down to this banking center. I think it's a disaster for the Big Apple. I lived there in 1980. I've been there a lot since then, and I don't live there now, and I doubt anyone's going to move there willingly if a hard left, and I can't even begin to describe how far left Mr. Mamdani is. He's very, very far to the left of AOC. Abolish prisons, defund the police. Forget the globalize the intifada stuff. He doesn't have much impact on national security issues, but he does on the quality of life of New Yorkers. I lived there in 1980, which was the nadir of New York City, and it's been slowly rebuilding. I think he's going to take it right back to those bad old days where you really didn't want to go to Times Square after dark. And if anyone can beat him, Eric Adams is going to have to get everybody else off the ballot, like Curtis Lee was an old colleague of mine, and then get every moderate to say, maybe incompetent isn't as bad as lunatic.
Yeah, look, I mean, there's no denying he's really good on social media. He's running a high-energy campaign. He's bringing in young voters. But as you mentioned, his policies are about as far left as you can get. And now New York Democrats, elected officials, they're not getting behind him. Take a listen.
We just had a primary election, and that election is sent clear sentiments about what the people of New York City are looking for. This isn't just about Mr. Mamdani as an individual. This is about the message that the people of New York City are trying to send to our party. I think that a clear message was sent on Tuesday, and I think it's up to me to listen to them.
So that was AOC, who does support him. What we were trying to get to was this. These are quotes from elected Democrats in New York. You got Congressman Tom Suozzi saying, quote, "I had serious concerns about Assemblyman Mamdani before yesterday, and that is one of the reasons I endorsed his opponent. Those concerns remain." Then you got Congresswoman Laura Gillen saying, "Socialist Zoran Mamdani is too extreme to lead New York City. His entire campaign has been built on unachievable promises and higher taxes, which is the last thing New York needs." Hugh, your thoughts?
Well, both of those are incumbents who are going to face very difficult races in November of 2026, what usually should be escape for the out party. The title charts of American politics are the out party wins in the off year, but not if you've got a radical leftist labeled as your colleague. And these two congressmen especially are just the first wave of people who are going to walk away. Chuck Schumer was remarkably ambivalent in his not quite an endorsement. His reaction was, I've been following him. It was an incoherent reaction because everyone at the DNC and every Democrat who is not from the far left, and I mean the far left, has got to be worried about being tagged as a Mamdani supporter, brother in arms, sister in arms, whatever it is. They just have to be afraid of getting bagged and tagged as one of these leftists because it doesn't work.
Bagged and tagged. I loved it. But Hugh, I was thinking about the fact that we got a chance to talk to you today, and I feel that the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, they need to do something for these younger Americans who are trying to make it work. The affordability issue in a big city like New York is a problem. It is very expensive to think about raising a family here, and people are either leaving or they're casting about looking for anyone who might be able to help them. So I think that, the key to that to me is economic growth, but both parties have to figure out a way to address this.
Yeah, but every year the American Legislative Exchange Council puts out a book called the Top 50, the best and worst states. And the best states are always those states that regulate the least, tax the least, and make it easy to build homes because those homes become more affordable. So Utah always wins. Florida is always in second place. You know who's at the bottom? New York, Connecticut, California. So if you continue to do the same thing, raise taxes, stop new construction starts, you're going to end up with the same affordability. So the so-called abundance Democrats like Ezra Klein, the first thing they have to do is persuade their party to stop killing abundance, which is what their party is intent on doing, redistributing the wealth as opposed to growing the pie.
I agree. That book, that whole abundance thing is worth another discussion. Maybe we'll have that one day. Thank you so much, Hugh. Have a great weekend.
Thank you,
Rich
Dan.
States, Poor States author John Williamson's coming up after the break. We're going to talk to him. But since I brought up the markets with Dana and Bill, let me do the market check brought to you by American Federal. AmericanFederal.com, where you go to buy or sell gold or silver. AmericanFederal.com, where you go to talk coins if you're one of those people that love to collect coins and that sort of thing. But mostly it's for people who want to diversify their portfolio by adding precious metals. You can do it with Nick Rovich and his team by calling 1-800-221-7694. If you're watching on the Salem News Channel, the number's right there, but I'll repeat it for you, 1-800-221-7694. American Federal, honest. They've been in the business 44 years now. Nick Rovich sits down with you, talks about what you need to do, what your objective is when it comes to wealth. How much do you want to buy? When do you want to buy it? How often do you want to buy it? He is a perfect guy. His other guys are wonderful counselors as well. Give them a call, 800-221-7694. Now, the market today was really good for everybody. The Dow was up 1%. The S&P was up 0.5%. The NASDAQ was up 0.5%. And gold took a long-awaited tumble, down 2% to $3,285 an ounce. What that tells me is that the world is convinced Iran is shattered,
that there isn't going to be a resumption of that war and that the regime may in fact be folding up like a cheap lawn chair, and that oil is going down and we can expect the Arab Accords to grow and that the fanatics have been thrown out. And I think the markets are pretty happy with Donald Trump. They also got some trade deals. They're going to get peace in the DPR, Democratic Republic of Congo, DRC, and Rwanda, thanks to Secretary Rubio working on President Trump's direction. So the markets are happy as we head into the weekend. And if you are happy and you want to diversify, you want to take some of that money out of the market that went up so bigly, big brand new highs for the NASDAQ and I believe the S&P 500 today as well, take some chips off and buy gold. Well, it dropped precipitously for you today. Well, not precipitously, 2% swing. It's a big swing for gold. But call Nick Grovich and his team, 1-800-221-7694. Let me also remind you, I'm in the Relief Factor studio. I've got my Relief Factor bag in hand. I took it in hour number 1. I'm feeling better than I have in 8 days. A week ago yesterday, threw my back out lifting boxes of books. And by doing that, I sent myself back to the 3 times a day Relief Factor regime. And that's not normally what you do. When you get the starter pack, 1995, 3-week starter pack, you take a packet 3 times a day for the first week, twice a day for the second week, once thereafter. So that's the way to get the levels up in your body by carrying curcumin, resveratrol, and omega. For natural supplements that support the anti-inflammatory natural system in your body. It's the only supplement I've taken for more than 20 years. I turn down supplements left and right. Don't want them, don't need them. I love Relief Factor because it keeps me going active. No matter how far I go or don't go, no matter how much I exercise or don't exercise, like this week I've got a grand total of 2 miles. Normally I'm a 20 to 30 mile a week guy, so I'll get it up maybe over the weekend to 10. But the thing you need to know is that Relief Factor works, and the only thing you have to do is call them, 1-800, the number 4 and the word relief, 1-800, the number 4 and the word relief, or go to their website at relieffactor.com, relieffactor.com. I also want to go back and tell you about StopHealthCostHikes.com. Now, it is an infelicitous website, StopHealthCosthikes.com. StopHealthCostHikes.com. If I say it enough, I'll remember it. StopHealthCostHikes.com. Here's what's going on. The reconciliation is underway. Some senators want to add a bunch of mandates. Some senators want to raise the price of the individual health care plans available on the exchanges. Some senators don't want to leave it alone and let it fix, let it heal naturally. The healthcare system shattered by Obamacare. The last thing we need to do is turn it upside down again, and we don't need costs to go up. So please go and visit StopHealthCostHikes.com. Get the facts on reconciliation. StopHealthCostHikes.com. StopHealthCostHikes.com. You will not believe what Jonathan Williams has done to me. He is, of course, with one of our great sponsors, the American Legislative Exchange Council. But if you're watching on the Salem News Channel, if you look over on John's right shoulder there, he's managed to get a cutout of the state of Michigan. And we all know the top of Michigan belongs to Wisconsin. But John, we're gonna have to shut the shot down if that thing is there next week. Welcome. It was great seeing you on Wednesday night. How are you?
Well, great to see you, my friend. And it was wonderful having dinner together and talking about all the big, beautiful issues going on here in Washington and across the states.
I got to tell you, though, I choked this morning. I got a question on America's Newsroom with Dana Perino and Bill Malugin, and I wanted to cite rich states, poor states, and I ended up botching the name but getting the states right, Utah and Florida, and at the bottom, California, because we were talking about New York's mayoral race. How bad do you think New York City can get, Jonathan Williams? Your handle on X is tax economist. They can't go lower than 50. Maybe you can develop a new sub-zero ranking for cities.
Well, there's always President Obama's 57 states, if you remember. So
Yes.
there always could go worse, right? We could always compete with others. I mean, you don't want to be in the same sentence as Cuba and Venezuela, which is, I'm afraid, where New York City would go under Mr. Mondami. You know, have just the horrible, outside, of course, his just horrific anti-Semitic rhetoric and comments that he's made in the past that should just disqualify anyone for being a major policy player in the United States. Outside of that, his socialist ideas on nationalizing or having a government-run grocery store chain idea. I mean, talk about bringing back the bread lines, right, from the days of socialism. And so, New York is in bad shape. New York is already 50th out of 50 in rich states, poor states, and it's been that way for nearly each and every edition. It gave it up only a couple of years to Vermont. And so you really wonder, this is probably the only man in America that could make people like AOC look conservative. So maybe New York, the cooler heads will prevail, and there'll be some discussions of others that will unite kind of a more rational common sense agenda, even if it's one that's a Democrat that's for common sense. That's a good thing, right?
Yeah, I've begun the maybe Eric Adams isn't so bad series. Anyway, after this segment gets done, and I praise Utah and Florida pursuant to richstatespoorstates.com, I get an email from Jason Chaffetz, former congressman, now Fox News host, saying, "You wouldn't believe Utah, Hugh. The affordability here is a real problem. We haven't got enough houses for our kids." So, Jonathan, where does that figure when you do your rankings, entry-level housing? Because it really does tell you where a state will be 30 years from now if young families can get into a house.
Well, it's a big question everywhere. And, it's one of the things that we've talked about many times, property taxes. Utah would be that much more unaffordable if it wasn't for its ALEC model truth and taxation on property taxes that's on the books and has been for over 35 years. But you look at the issues of geography, really, and this gets to Senator Mike Lee's point. I know it's a big debate right now in Washington, whether the federal government should own 60% of Utah's land area. I think it's a big unforced error that the federal government is not given back the states and the people of the states the land as promised. You go to Nevada, it's more like 80 or 90% owned by the federal government. So when you have a constraint like that, you have the issues of the valley around Salt Lake City, and you only have so much area of housing that you can build. It's no surprise that you have some affordability issues, and that's just a constraint that until Senator Lee and some folks in D.C. get that figured out, there's not much you can fix necessarily from a policy level at the state level.
At least don't get in their way. We've got some endangered species listing in Utah, which are terrible as well. But Jonathan, I want to talk to you about the brand new study on labor policy rankings. And I don't want people's eyes to glaze over. I found this fascinating because I know what right to work means to the growth of a state. Would you explain what ALEC is studying here and who won these rankings and why, and who lost these rankings and why?
Well, it's a great report, States That Work, that you can get at alec.org. And this is an annual publication similar to Rich States, Poor States, or our education publication on education freedom that we've talked about many times, for states to rank themselves on policies like right to work and like occupational licensing issues, and like the idea of collective bargaining and how much power public sector unions should have. I mean, this is a great Utah story from this year, where Utah this session became only the third state in the country to say public sector workers probably shouldn't have the idea of being able to collectively bargain. That is something that should be devoted just for private sector workers, because at the end of the day, if you're a public sector worker, who are you bargaining with? Where are taxpayers at that table between government and between public sector unions? So the people that come out last in that equation, unfortunately, are America's hardworking taxpayers. So Utah does very well in that report, coming in number 2 nationally. Arizona gets the honors there, being the top-ranked state in the country. But Hugh, and when it comes to why it matters, I mean, this is a yes or no issue for many states, and why some states are creating jobs and growing and other states aren't. In fact, we share a variable of right to work in the Rich States, Poor States publication, because we think it's that important for the growth of states. And, while Ohio, Hugh, has never passed right to work in recent years, Michigan did. And we had some really strong growth from that. Unfortunately, the progressives that took over Lansing just repealed it. We've got our great speaker, Matt Hall, from the ALEC board trying to fix that. But it's an important determinant. A lot of job creators will say, I'm not going to even consider a state for an investment unless it's a right to work state.
It's economic suicide for a state to hang on to the mandatory unionization rules. John, I want to make sure we end with a high note this week. New Hampshire became the 17th state in the union to embrace universal school choice. Would you explain what they did and what you expect it will mean in New England?
Well, it's an incredible victory. Number 17, the Live Free or Die state, is living up to its motto to give every parent, every student the opportunity to apply for an education savings account, to have dollars to spend on the public, private, charter, homeschool of their choice, to go and have that real flexibility for those Granite State residents. And something that Governor Ayotte there has been a big champion of, Senator Sullivan, Representative McDonnell. It was a great team effort, and it's not the easiest state for conservative ideas, but number 17 across the board, truly, Hugh, it couldn't have been done without the hard work of so many across this country and so many of the ALEC men and women out there leading this effort. It's just, if we would have said 5 years ago, we would have even have been at 5 states that were universal school choice. We'd have gotten laughed out of the room, and here we are at number 17, an incredible victory, the first in New England of hopefully many, many more in the years to come.
It develops momentum, and I think that's what's happening with school choice, and it's thanks to ALEC and a lot of legislators. If you're a state legislator, married to one, parent of one, child of one, brother or sister of one, make sure they belong to ALEC, ALEC.org, and get the ALEC State of the States newsletter, alec.org/Hugh. Thank you, Jonathan. I want to let everyone know I made the switch to consumer cellular. I want you to consider making that switch as well. 1-800-411-4454. Use the promo code HUGH25. The promo code HUGH25 will get you $25 off, $5 off each of your first 5 monthly invoices. Now, why should you make the switch? Well, you want to have savings without sacrifice. You want the same clear quality consistently across the country, and you'll get that with consumer cellular. But you also want to save money. And do you even know how much you're paying for your cell phone? Would you dig out the bill or do what it takes, even if it's a half hour on the internet, to track down your account that you don't really know that you've had and find out what you're agreed to be charged, and then call Consumer Cellular or go to consumercellular.com/you or call them at 1-800-411-4454. Use the code HUGH25 and find out why you, if you're over 50, you can get 2 lines unlimited data for $60 a month, and you may not need unlimited data. You may need 5 gigs or 10 gigs. Call them and find out, consumercellular.com/you. Eli Lake is with the Free Press. He is also the host of the Breaking History podcast. Eli, the week that we just finished, I asked for a BDA, battle damage assessment, from former Secretary of State and CIA Director Mike Pompeo at the beginning of this program today. And he said the Iranian regime is crippled. That was it.
Yes.
What do you make of his assessment?
I think he's absolutely right. And my hope is that Secretary Rubio and President Trump revive some of the great programs under Secretary Pompeo, which I covered very closely. These were not, I don't like the word regime change for this, but what they were programs to reach the Iranian people directly. Now is the time. And what Pompeo authorized, you should go back, there's a wonderful speech that I gave, I believe, in 2019, in which he sort of laid out it's the humanitarian case for the Iranian people taking back their own country. That is something that the Iranian people have to lead. The regime, I think, is crippled at this point, and there are things that we should do in the West. And I think the model here is the solidarity movement and the kind of support that we gave for Lech Walesa, the support that we gave for Václav Havel at the end of the Cold War, the fact that Ronald Reagan knew the names of the political prisoners and he would say them publicly at the United Nations and other places like that. That is, I think, the next step. To me, that is not the same thing as Operation Iraqi Freedom. In fact, they're very different things. We're not trying to pick winners and losers in Iran for the next government. We are not going to invade Iran. We're not going to have a coalitional provisional authority in Iran. None of that's happening. But what we can do is use the power of our moral example as we come up on our 249th anniversary and remember that the principles and the revolutionary ideas, the seeds planted in our Declaration of Independence, are universal ideas. And that there are...
Eli, I hope you do a Breaking History on solidarity and its applicability to this moment in Iran, because that's a very, very excellent analogy. You also put me in the Wayback Machine. I'm older than you are, but during the Iranian Revolution, I was working for Richard Nixon in his exile in San Clemente, and we were working on a book called The Real War, in which he wrote, at every moment, take every opportunity to push freedom into every closed society, whether it's a small crack or a big crack, just push freedom in. I think that's what Secretary Pompeo and President Trump did in term one. And if you read The Truth Social by President Trump, he's not backing off sanctions today. He's mad at the Ayatollah for being so ungrateful. Did you read that?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think this is a situation where you gotta trust Trump on this. His instincts have been right. This was such a successful military operation, Israel and America. The combination of it, I think, it's not just devastating to the regime. What a demonstration to the rest of the world. It is filling up our deterrence meter that had been depleted. Now arms control and non-proliferation diplomacy have teeth again. There are so many great things that have come out of this that it's kind of amazing to me that the initial reaction was this, low confidence initial assessment from the Defense Intelligence Agency. There's plenty of time. I'm convinced that I think that the Israelis are telling the truth when they say there's been, severe damage to their program. But
Eli, anyone who's I know you know this, but I want to explain to the audience. We do signals intelligence. We listen to everything. But that you can spook signals intelligence. And we used to have to try and figure it out when I was at DOJ. Are they on to us? Do they know we're listening? Are they feeding us bad information? In fact, the Soviets at the time knew that we had certain devices and they spoke false into that. It would be like piping Baghdad Bob into the DIA and them coming out and telling us we hadn't taken the center of Baghdad. It was extraordinary. And they had to have been motivated by an anti-Trump animus, right? There's no other reason to leak that.
I have reason to believe, based on how many people got the same report, that it was fairly coordinated. I think somebody had maybe sent that report to the Hill, and then it was sent out, to try to kind of rain on the parade. I think the Trump administration did a pretty good job of shooting it down, and then the Israelis come in, and then you have the Director General of the International Atomic Energy Agency, no fan of the Trump administration, coming out and saying that he believed that there was significant damage to Fordo, which is important.
You're one of the people who brought David Albright to my attention, and you really know an expert when they're not ready for prime time. They can't do 1 minute sound bites, and so they end up running into themselves. Well, David finally got around to making a statement in a different show today that when I hear people say that their program's been set back 10 years, I know that person's a moron. Because you can't set any nuclear program back more than 5 years, because if you are starting from a cold start, it only takes you 5 years to get to a bomb. So David made it so obvious to me. We can't set it back more than 5 years, but we sure can't send a message, don't do this again. Do you think that message was received?
Yes, and I don't understand why in this conversation about what the damage we did to the program, we don't ever hear the word deterrence. I think about how demoralizing it is that the Iranian regime spent billions and billions of dollars, endured years of sanction and international censure to build a nuclear program, to have it basically in, smoking rubble at this point, and to do so and not have any real defenses for it, and no one came to their aid. It's possible that they're all kind of millenarian, apocalyptic fanatics, and it's impossible to deter them. Maybe some people in the regime are like that. I don't think that that's the case. And you're talking about a sophisticated regime that has suffered a mighty blow. And what a message this sends to all of the other rogue states. So I don't see why we would be, sort of assuming that they would restart it right away, or now they have the real motivation. They had the real motivation before. They wanted a nuclear weapon. They wanted to have a nuclear umbrella for all of their proxies. Their proxies are in shambles. Their program is in shambles. Now's the time for the Iranian people to finish the job, and that's the way we want to see that transition work.
It's a smoking rubble. It's also a glowing rubble. Eli, very quickly before we come back from break, if we had a collapse of a nuclear facility in the United States similar to Fordo, like 3 Mile Island, if it really got bombed and all the uranium cores were hot and buried, do you think we'd be saying it's nothing to worry about? It would be an utter disaster. It's a catastrophe. It's Chernobyl.
Agreed. It is Chernobyl. And it is a catastrophe. And we'll have to find out what happened to that enriched uranium. But right now, they don't have the infrastructure to do anything with that enriched uranium. Of course, it could be in a dirty bomb. That would be a nightmare scenario. But I have to believe the Israelis have pretty good intelligence based on what they've demonstrated thus far. So we'll see. And my hope is that that this negotiation with Witkoff and Rubio will be kind of a dictation of terms than what we'd seen before when the Iranians go to the negotiating table, because I don't think they have any cards.
I'm optimistic about that. Eli, I want to go back and ask you you love history like I love history. I love history so much. I go to sleep listening to Tom Holland's The Rest is History
isn't he
podcast.
great?
He's doing one on.
He's fabulous.
It's a fabulous podcast. And
He's great.
Right now they're doing the Irish Revolution. But because of the news cycle, we tend not to recognize when history's right in front of us. So with your Breaking History podcast, how would you rank the week that is closing right now? I went off the air at this time a week ago. A week is past. How would you rank this week in terms of significance of all the weeks in this century?
I think it's right up there with Trump winning again. I don't think we can underestimate it, because we're going to see a lot of ripple effects from this. And if you add to that this week, in my view, the alarming news of the win of Mamdani in New York, I think it's an enormously important week historically. So, I mean, you're right. If I had to rank it, I mean, I think when Trump winning the second time, Trump winning the first time, those are big ones.
So 9/11, so's the invasion of Iraq.
9/11, of course. Right.
We've only got like 6 weeks in these 25 years to come close to this, which leads me to my last question about Iran. When you suffer a strategic defeat like this, what does it do to your elite? Khomeini might be living in a cloud. We don't know if he's like Joe Biden and even connected. But what do your elites think when your country can't defend itself, and when it can't strike back except in the most random way? 12 days of war, they killed 30 Israeli civilians. That's it. Not one plane, not one military casualty. What does it do to the regime's sense of self?
That is a great question. And by the way, you want to put an even finer point on it. It's not just any regime. It's a regime that believes that they are carrying out the will of God, and that God is rewarding them and their strategy.
Oh, yeah.
So when something like this happens, it's very similar to when the Soviets suffered the massive setbacks in Afghanistan. They believed that they were the engine of the eventual end of history, that they were the engine to get to the synthesis. When something like that happens, when you have a regime that is based on this idea that you are kind of like, that destiny is behind, that you're the regime of destiny, and you suffer something like this, and they have no means of correcting it through kind of free democratic process, it's devastating. Add to that we have seen 5 times since 2017 national uprisings in Iran. The Iranian people despise their elites. So that is a vice. The message that you have utterly been humiliated by a country that you despised and called the little Satan, and then you are hated by your own people. I don't think it's survivable. It doesn't mean that it won't be a rough road ahead in terms of a transition, but I'm hoping for a democratic transition. But I don't think that is a combination that's very difficult to survive, especially for
I don't think you're being
based on this fanatic principle.
You're not wearing rose-colored glasses. You're looking at history.
No.
Because when you mentioned solidarity, solidarity eventually led to some liberalization with glasnost, which then led to a very sudden collapse in East Germany of the wall, the collapse of the Warsaw Pact. It just accelerated. So what happened here is first Israel killed everyone in Hamas, then they killed everyone in Hezbollah, then Syria fell apart, now Iran is humbled. We could actually be on the cusp of a golden age for the Middle East. And I don't mean to borrow from Trump. I just mean to say Israel could lead the way as a hegemon to a very good, prospering Middle East. I'm an optimist about that. Are you?
Right. I'm an optimist too, and I'll say one other thing. The ideological group known as the Restrainers, who wanted to get America out of the Middle East to focus on China, which I think is a fine goal, now they have their opportunity. So the irony is that a lot of the people who didn't want the United States to get involved, now because of what Trump did and the success of that mission, there is now a great opportunity to finally pivot out of the Middle East towards China. Who was the driver of instability? Iran. And now, good luck, Iran. I mean, are they going to be able to come back? I don't think so.
So, Eli, total different question, but the last one I
Yeah.
asked Secretary Pompeo. When we see the weapons of war that have been used in Ukraine and in Iran, and they're small and they're lethal and they're quick and they're invisible, Secretary Pompeo pointed out the B-2 is a big boy program, so we still need big platforms. But do you think our Pentagon is prepared to think strategically about what kind of weapons we need to deploy and defenses we need to have? Because, boy, Ukraine hitting those bombers in Siberia and Israel taking out everything in Iran 1,400 miles away. The world has changed. There is no abroad. Everything is right next door to us.
One of the most underrated things in an incredibly historic week was the very good meeting that Zelensky had with Trump. And what did they come away with? They talked about drones. They talked about getting Ukrainian drones and know-how and technology and having the Pentagon benefit from that. That is how alliances are supposed to work. I wholly encourage it. I think that you've got right now an opportunity for the Pentagon to focus on kind of getting out of some of the older platforms that don't work and focusing on these smaller, mobile, or lethal things. And I do think that there are at least people I've talked to who kind of get where it's going. And the good news is that Ukraine and Israel are allies of the United States. They don't want to share that technology with Russia or China. They want to share it with us.
Eli,
And
pro
that's-
tip for
that's
the
a
young
great thing.
journalist. Never be afraid to say, I had no idea that happened. I had no idea that Zelensky met with Trump. I mean, I've been consuming media as fast as but I missed this. When did it happen?
I think it was on the sidelines of
the.
I think it was on the sidelines of the NATO summit, and I just saw the headlines and so forth. But yeah, that was one of the things that, by the way, this is what the Ukrainians have been saying. They've been saying, we know how to do this drone stuff. We're really good at it now, and so this is a great opportunity. Again, you don't have to do a regime change where you don't have to get bogged down. I understand the criticism of not wanting to repeat mistakes of the last 20 years. I get it. But there are also opportunities here. And Ukraine has not proved itself to be a basket case. It's proved itself to be a very, very capable country fighting for its life. I think that there's good values reasons, but I think there's good realpolitik reasons for taking them up on these offers and helping the Ukrainians help us. And I think that's a good thing.
I think for years and years, people are going to be looking at this week and saying it was an inflection point for not just the United States and Israel, but for the West, and a good one. Eli Lake will be recording that, and I'm looking forward to the next breaking history. As I always say to good podcasters, Eli, faster, please, quoting the late Michael Ledeen. Faster, please.
Thank you.
Talk to you soon. Follow Eli at Eli Lake on X. Go and follow, like, and subscribe. Opine on Breaking History Podcast at the Free Press. Time to meet our poet laureate of the Hugh Hewitt Show, Tarzana Joe. Hello, Joe.
Hello, Hugh. Before I was Tarzana Joe, I was Broadway Joe. You didn't know that, did you? And I predict that when I finish this poem, you will finish the poem with me. Let's see if I'm right. I was born in New York City. Well, really out in Queens. If you're not a native, I can't tell you what that means. People from Manhattan say, I live in the city. If someone from my block said that, it really wouldn't be pretty. Folks who come from Brooklyn are proudly Brooklynites. Say they're from the city and you'd get into fights. The so-called outer boroughs are full of geeks and wonks. There's guys from Staten Island who've never seen the Bronx. But now they're all united. It's plain for all to see. The voters of New York, they want everything for free. Free groceries and childcare, free rent with every lease. Social workers everywhere are sworn to keep the peace. A code of civil conduct that runs 1,000 pages and doubling the minimum of everybody's wages. Now, how can they afford all this? Well, if you're not aware, finally the rich will have to cough up their fair share. The situation's so darn sad it isn't even funny. How long until they all run out, of
other people's
money?
It's
a nice place to visit by Tarzana Joe.
Joe, I said before we came on and we were setting up the shot, if you had just waited 30 years, you could add that T-shirt for free, because I'm pretty sure Mr. Mondani is going to give those away. And probably a matching suit.
I'll send my address.
Do you think he's going to pay for baseball tickets for everyone? Is there anything he hadn't promised?
No, but there's no end to what's there's something very interesting I wanted to mention. Someone said, "Oh, he's going to just impose a 2% tax on people who make over a million on the amount over a million. That's $2,000 if you're making 2.1 million." And I said, "No, it's not the $2,000 that people are going to save when they move. It's the $100,000 of city income tax that they're not going to pay if they move. It's the last straw."
It is the last straw, but I don't think he's going to win. We have begun Is Eric Adams really that bad movement here on the Hugh Hewitt Show? And we will be promoting Eric. Even though Curtis is a friend of mine, Curtis Lewa, we got to be serious about this. New York, unless you want to go to the free grocery store. I might go to see the free grocery store because I never got to Moscow during communism, so I don't know what it's like. I would like to see that.
One brand of bread, one brand of butter. And
right.
Bernie Sanders says, why do we need 3 brands of deodorant? Why?
We only need $3, 4 pencils, and 1 new mayor, not named Mondani. Tarzana Joe at tarzanajoe.com. You can also write to him with all your poetry needs. tarzanajoe@reagan.com. His rates are reasonable. And if you're a New Yorker, they may be for free. Write him. tarzanajoe@reagan.com. tarzanajoe@reagan.com. Get ahead of the socialist curve.